Welcome to lit.happensse, Unpacking Senior English. I'm Adriel.
And I'm Belle.
We're experienced English teachers dedicating to supporting both new and experienced educators in a world in which we are often time poor, to empower our students to excel in their English studies.
If you're an English teacher like us, navigating this curriculum, then this podcast is designed with you in mind. And our mission really is to break down the complexities by unpacking English nationally. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us on another episode with lit.happensse. Today's focus, we're going to name this episode Calling All New English Teachers. We just thought we might focus today on discussing what it's like being a new teacher, a new English teacher. We thought Adriel, I've been feeling very inspired by kickstarting this podcast. And I know that every time I think of something to say, I can almost think about the person or the experience that had brought that understanding out, right? Yeah. So I was feeling really inspired. We both were. And we just thought, well, Adriel and I can talk about our experiences as new English teachers, what that was like. We could talk about some insights we have and some practical suggestions.
Yeah, that sounds good. And it's definitely something that all of us will face, some of the challenges, the highs and lows of teaching. So, we'll just give you a little bit of our insight into how we started our career, really, and have continued to move along, again, through the highs and lows.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's take it away. I thought we might get started, Adriel, just talking about, our personal experiences, how we began teaching. We thought it's perfect timing, a new year. Obviously, if you're an experienced teacher, you might be ticking along as normal, but no doubt you'll have some new teachers in your staff room or at least in your school. And so I think that this will be a really nice conversation either way. If you're an experienced teacher, spending time with new teachers again, or if you're a newbie entering the room. And I was just thinking about, my own personal experiences. When I started teaching, I started, back in 2015, the good old fashioned route when everything was really competitive was you started casual teaching, right? And I like that giggle there because that was like really deep end. Hey, I remember rocking up, Adriel, to some casual lessons and being like, I'm getting paid to do this by myself,
Yeah,
like, is this
crazy.
legal? Isn't
It's
it?
crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy how the landscape has shifted and changed over these last 10 years in particular and in our careers. But yeah, that's wild.
Absolutely. And I just, I remember doing the casual route for a little bit, different school, different day, getting that text message at 6:30, 6 in the morning. Can you come work? Being like, yep, I can do that. But that was really a really worthwhile experience because, you do get to see firsthand what the students are like on any given day and the way that schools function and different schools function. Yeah, you know what I mean? And I think that's a good thing, but I also felt that casual teaching could be quite isolating in some ways, not intentionally, but, you've got your regular teachers, your classroom teachers going about their day, and, you might be sort of sitting in a staff room or sitting in an area where, you don't know anybody. And like, I'm such an introvert. Like, I would introduce myself, but otherwise I'd just be fly on the wall, mind my business, not get in the way, But I can think of a few people who showed me such kindness in those early days, hey, like, especially as a casual.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, I think that's one of the good things that you sort of just mentioned there, albeit sometimes we think that people are so busy that, they might not have the time of day to maybe, answer a question here or there, but you'll find in every faculty that there will be people who are so willing to help you along with your journey. It's just about asking those questions, and that's where you get your learning and your fulfillment. Like we always say this on practicals, if you're going through one of those practicals, it's tiring, it's crazy, but you've got like a 10-week block maybe, and at the end of it, there's sort of like an end there. However, when you get into the real world, and like you just mentioned, I get paid to do this. And then when the rubber hits the road there, and it's just like, oh, wow, I really do need to, ask these questions because that's where you do your real learning, especially in your first few years. So, Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I know for myself personally, I started off again end of 2014, early 2015, and we I had a different route to yourself, Bill. I was fortunate enough to
Mhm.
actually have a Teach New South Wales scholarship. I did my second practical at the school that I ended up being given a full-time position at in the English department. And by and behold, that was a different experience in itself because,
Mhm.
you sort of transition into a already settled faculty, I would say, like people already have their roles, their responsibilities, and you sort of find your feet. I know one of the big things as a youngster was fly on the wall sort of thing. I'm a bit less introverted, I would say, but
Yeah.
I, but
You're
like this,
definitely more confident in opening up nice conversation for sure.
yeah, yeah. That's one of my quality teaching area focuses. Often I like to know narrative, and I often
Mm,
find that in my teaching career. But it's exhausting in those first few years, especially if
for
you've
sure.
been given like a senior class in particular, which is what
Mhm.
our podcast is sort of geared towards. But dealing with 30 personalities, maybe 4 or 5 times a day, or 7 or 8 times a day, depending on your period structures for your school, it is crazy. It's hectic in the first few years. So
Yeah,
hopefully today's sort of podcast will give us a little bit of insight into how we dealt and navigated through some of these challenges. And
absolutely.
you know
Absolutely.
we think that we are sometimes immune because we're teachers, but we're not. We're human beings, and
That's
we
right.
do go through those highs and lows, especially in the first few years. There were countless times
That's
in my first few years, first few weeks, months, and then years where I was like, "Is this really for me?" you
yeah.
know.
Mhm.
But yeah, but then you sort of go into your mentors, and you start to talk to people, and they'll guide you through it, and you start to enjoy your teaching a lot more.
Absolutely. And also, if you are going that casual route and looking for stability, don't be disheartened because I
Mm,
was doing casual work and at the end of the day, the head teacher admin of that particular school said, "Oh, I've got a block coming up in English for a few weeks if you're interested." I said, "Definitely." And that
yeah,
turned into temp work for a couple of years at a wonderful school with wonderful supportive people
mm,
who in a way help raise me. It's that funny thing, like they
yeah,
help those early days, right? They help you establish those baselines. And I'm really
yeah,
fortunate to still be in touch and still be very dear friends with many of those people. And I'll never forget that experience, those early days, because those early days are hard, right? You're in the trenches.
yeah, yeah,
And when you can have people to support you, that's amazing. And
yeah,
eventually I did secure a permanent job at another school, and it was very, very hard to leave that first
mm,
one. But in saying that, I went to another school, and again, very fortunate, amazing teachers, so much
yeah,
experience. And that, you're really spot on with that. If you kind of don't ask,
yeah,
nobody's going to really know how and where to approach you. So
yeah,
I think there is that. And I know as that introvert, the first few weeks at my new school, I was just like trying to work out new system, new space, new bell times, new kids, new content, new everything. I remember, our amazing head teacher,
mm,
being like,
mm,
"I know you're working on yourself, sweetheart, you're getting self organized, but if you don't start talking to people, they're going to think you don't like them." you know?
yeah,
And it was
exactly
so
right.
true. It was so true because I was so in my head about things,
Yeah, yeah,
and I remember
yeah,
saying to her, "Oh no, like I have no problem with anyone." She goes, I know how to keep doing what you're doing, but just remembering, we're all here to help you." And
yeah,
that was it. Once I realized that, the sky can really be the limit after that with the
that's right.
support, right?
That's right. And just on the flip side of things, I've been very fortunate enough not to actually go through, like you've just mentioned, very supportive head teachers and teaching staff. Look, in every faculty, you're going to have different dynamics. English
Very true.
faculties are
Lots of
definitely very interesting
personalities.
spaces because,
Yeah.
we often are well read, well versed in life as English teachers. So my encouragement in this sort of space is, you know, just find your feet. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to ask those questions. Sometimes it
Yeah.
may feel like, in the busyness of things, people may sound like they're snappy or, sometimes not
Mm.
approachable, but often there's more beyond the surface. And, just
That's
take your
so
time.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, take your
So
time and
true.
just really, really engage with your teaching. You know, if you're asking questions, if you're showing that initiative, if you're working hard on your craft and your pedagogy, people will see that within you, and you will definitely be, I guess, more comfortable, not only in yourself, but you know, when people start to approach you, you can sort of go to them with an idea. It's sort of like we speak with our students, you know, don't
Mm.
be afraid to ask those questions. And you know, they're often
Yeah, put
afraid
yourself
to
out
ask
for a
those
bit.
questions. Yeah, because we often let our, I would say for me, like you let your pride get in the way. I do a lot of the time. Oh, I don't need to ask this question because I know this already. Really, you've got people with 10, 15 years experience in your faculty that have been there, done that, and they've got so much insight to give you. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, just throw that pride out of the way. Again, I'm guilty of this, but once I did, it was just amazing in
And you're
terms
so
of
right.
growth.
It doesn't mean that, oh, because you don't know, but perspective is everything, especially
Mm,
in English.
mm,
If you can get another approach under your belt, like why not? And I think
yeah,
you're right. There's this, yeah, sometimes, especially English faculties tend to be numbers wise quite big.
mm,
Let alone if you're in a school where you've got multiple faculties in one excuse me, area, that can be quite daunting. But find a couple of good people. Often
mm,
that's all you need. We all have, like I get along with everyone, but we all have different teachers that we just tend to bounce off of a bit
yeah,
more,
yeah,
whether that's style or experience or whatever, that's how it starts. You find a person, you find a couple people, and then
mm,
before you know it, you have friends across other faculties, which is really
yeah,
nice too. And then you can, start asking and considering things on a more whole school level as opposed to
mm,
just your subject level. All
mm.
right.
No,
I think that's a really,
100%.
yeah. I think that's probably enough about us. We're not just talking about ourselves all podcasts. Let's why don't we move on to maybe some insights that we might have for new teachers, like some things that we have done well or we've encouraged our prac students and our new scheme teachers around us to do. Some strategies, I guess.
Yeah. Um, so just before we actually go on to that, I just have to mention and highlight the importance of mentorship for
Yes,
new
yes.
teachers. So
That's a huge insight.
as a new scheme teacher, I don't know if it's still the same, but I remember, you know, there's often funding that schools get in order to, you know, have a bit of time off with your mentor that you might get assigned with from your head teacher. Really take that time to ask your mentor questions. I mean, I was very fortunate to have a great mentor that really guided me, not only in like senior English stuff, but just all holistically English. He was a teacher of great wealth of experience, a senior marker for 15 years at the HSC. So it's just like on whole
Mm,
year worth of experience was so good. And what I'm saying is not just spending those, you know, those allotted periods with him, but say you've got a free period with your and you know your mentor's teaching a class, go in, go observe their classroom, look at the dynamics. Um, it may seem hard in the busyness of your day, but really take that time out because it will definitely help you in the long
oh,
term when it
yes.
comes to your teaching practice. And across KLAs, you mentioned this as well. If you know that there are teachers across KLAs that have, you know, something that you're working on. So, for example, you know, behavior management. How do they interact? What are some of the strategies? Like, go and ask questions. 99% of the time, these teachers will be more than willing to have you in their classroom just to come in and observe. And, you know, that mentorship is invaluable, I will say.
Yeah.
It's just, you really need to take a hold of that.
Absolutely. That's, I think, golden rule number one, because
Mm,
that's part of our professional development too,
mm,
So why not learn with someone who's not only teaching alongside you, but
mm.
has this wealth of experience that, like you said, many of them are so willing to share.
Yeah.
All it takes is you saying, listen, like, I'd really like some support. I'd really like to learn. Is there any way you can, help me out? Can we have a chat? Can I check your lesson?
Mm,
Is so
mm.
valuable. And, just even in the day to day when there's professional dialogue going
Yeah.
on around you, I
Yeah.
just remember when I would hear something, I'd be like, oh, that's good. And I'll just write it down. I would just keep a
Yeah.
list,
Yeah.
of things to when I had some time to then reflect on, oh, I'm going to really try that next time. Or,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to look into this a bit more. Because I think we find, especially in English staff rooms,
Mm,
there are wealth of knowledge because everybody, like you said, is usually pretty confident, usually
Yeah.
pretty well learned, willing to
Yeah.
share. So yeah, that mentorship is huge.
It's
All right,
huge. Yeah.
so it's huge. It's huge. Well, okay. Aside from, let's say, one strategy being, getting the mentorship in and getting some professional learning
Mm.
from those around you. What about in terms of, I guess, in the classroom? Because usually, your very first year, it's
Yeah.
sink or swim, right?
Yeah.
And
No,
I
exactly.
remember it's very much you're dealing with students whose names you don't know, and it's not
Yeah.
one class. It's usually 4 to 5 classes of students, and it could be all the way from 7 to 12, could be
Mm.
juniors, could be seniors. So it's a lot.
Mm.
I remember being told when I was a prac student in uni, you just fake it until you make it. Fake it until you don't have to fake it anymore.
Mm.
And I used to
Mm.
just kind of go in with that mindset of, I'm here to learn too, but I've got the basic tools I need, and
Yeah.
let's move forward. So let's talk about maybe some strategies we might have employed in the classroom as a
Yep.
new scheme teacher to help establish, our environments.
No, that sounds good. So first and foremost, you need your confidence. That's a big thing. So when you are entering your classroom, there's often this dynamic that we can have as new scheme teachers thinking, oh, I'm just going to be friends with the kids. And really, that's the first big no-no there. You're not a friend, you are the educator. And sometimes it can be
Yeah.
difficult. If you're a young person and, you're teaching a
Yes.
11 or 12 kid, there's not
Yeah.
much of an age gap and you can often have
That's
that
right.
blurred. But just remember, you are the adult in the room and it is your room. And
Yeah.
that's probably one of the big things. Depending on your school, like, and whether you have access to your own classroom and your own seating arrangements, like we were very fortunate that we had our own
Yeah.
classrooms where we could muck around and play with these things to best suit our needs. But I understand there are
Sometimes you
places out
don't.
there,
Yeah.
yeah, that you don't have this. So just remember that every classroom you go into, you step into it with confidence. You step into it with a well of like after taking a drink from the well of enthusiasm. But you are the adult in that room, and you have
Mhm.
expectations. So you make sure you set those expectations right from the beginning. Doesn't matter,
Yes.
how they might perceive you outside of the classroom as oh, you're the cool teacher or you're the teacher that has some fun outside, maybe kicks the ball around with the kids, play some handball during lunches and recesses. That's all well and good, but when you're in your classroom, it is a learning space, and your objective is to engage students with your
Yes.
subject area, your KLA. So that's my first thing. So establish your routine, your rules. So some schools have examples where there is a routine to come into the classroom, where students
Yeah.
have 3 or 4 rules that they might write down in
Yeah.
the front of their booklets, so
Yeah.
you can always reflect on this. I know myself, like some of the big things are, well, if I'm talking, no one else should be talking. I should be to the front. And if you're consistent with it, sometimes we think as young teachers, oh, but I'll come across like a bit too strict here. No, honestly, be strict. The first term,
That's
first 2
okay.
terms,
Mhm.
be as strict as you can. And
Mhm.
then, like I said,
Be really firm.
in other spaces where you're maybe out there in a sports sort of setting, if you've been given the opportunity to take a team out to grade sport or whatever it might be, that's when you can show them your human side a little bit, or get out there at the lunches and recesses and talk with the
Yeah.
kids. But when you're in
Yeah.
your room, you need to be firm right from the beginning, right from the get-go. Don't fall into that trap where you want to be friendly with the students, because you are
Mhm.
their teacher, you are the adult in the room. And this is one of the pieces of advice that I got that I'm so fortunate, that has helped me, especially when it's come to boys education in particular, teaching classes that are full of 30 or so boys that are in and out of your classroom through the school year due to many different reasons. But you've always got them in your hands, and it's not a sense that you're strict. It's they start to respect you because they enjoy routine and
Absolutely.
structure. Yeah.
Yeah, routine and structure is safety. And that's your ultimate goal, I think, is to create a safe and effective learning environment.
Yeah.
And ultimately that is your responsibility. I always like to every time I kind of thought of doing something or engage with something, I used to say to myself, is it firm and is it fair? And
Yeah.
if I could feel like I hit both, I was like, that's pretty good. And, you know, also you might have been able to practice behavior management strategies at your prac schools or whatever you did on practicum, and that might align with the school's values and you can bring that across. You might have had a very different experience on practicum and now you're having to come up with new skills. Ask those around you. I'll never forget, I had a very, very difficult year 9 class. And I remember talking to, I think it was the 2IC at the time. And I said, listen, I'm having XYZ issues. Can you suggest, what would you do? What are some strategies? And she said, okay, the next time you go into your room, you're going to try this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And can I tell you, like, the moment I started doing that everything settled right down. And like you said, we do sometimes have pride, because I always considered myself, even on practicum, as pretty reasonably good with behavior management. But you know, every class is different and
Yeah.
every student is different, and sometimes the students that we can have rapport with and get on side, you know, are not the same in other subjects, and vice versa. There are students that maybe you have rapport with that maybe I didn't as much, and it wasn't as effective. And there are ways to build that rapport, but it's what I'm saying is, I think is okay if they're not straight away really, like, you know, attached to you or really doing exactly. It's a progress, like you said, term or two. And then by term 3, there will be settled behavior, because they will see this is the routine, this is what they expect, and this is how I'm meant to behave. And, you know, call on your superiors, speak to your head teacher. Listen, I've got this class next. I'm going to try X, Y, and Z for behavior maybe, but what can I do as a backup? Because, you know, we don't know what we don't know. You know, even sometimes you can ask your faculty that. Like, I would always remember being able to say, I'm just next door. If you need anything, send a student, send something. If you feel like that student needs a 10-minute reprieve, you know, and then, you know, they can come in, have a bit of a separation from whatever's happening. But yeah, I think you won't know those strategies until you sort of ask and engage, right?
Yeah, you got to try these things. And you sort of just mentioned there, remember, you are a faculty for a reason, and you all are there to help each other out. And often, you know, good faculty, you will have teachers that are willing to help. So just be mindful of that. You're not in it alone. And I'll also say this, like, when you're in the classroom, I know I've said, like, you know, be firm. I like that idea of firm but fair. But make sure you get to know your students. Yeah, like, don't just say to your students when they come in, like, I make it a thing in my first week, even before, like, they come in, you learn all their names. It's a sign of respect. They understand that they know that my teacher knows who I am as an individual, not just as a, hey, you're one of my students. Little things like that matter. Get to know their stories. Ask them how their day's been. You know, when you are at the door entering the classroom, you know, good morning or good afternoon, how's your day been as you enter? And then these are like those little things that the kids sort of appreciate. And it's part of that quality teaching area of, you know, like for me, I've mentioned this idea of narrative and getting to know your students, understanding them through this idea of storytelling and connecting things to life a lot of the time. So it's these are things that you learn along the way, and each to their own. Everyone will manifest these pedagogies in their own way.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and this is where it's important to be exposed to a variety of different things. So that's what I'm saying. Like, collaboration is very important. Please don't go at it alone. Make sure you're asking those questions. Make sure you're seeking help. It's not a burden. It's actually, people will appreciate. Like, I know I've been in positions where, you know, you are there to help and lend a hand with some of the experiences that we've had, and a lot of the times teachers are more than willing to help out. You know, so I appreciate someone coming to me and asking me, hey, how do you deal with this? Or how would you deal with this? And maybe, you know, come in and sit with you one day, or you can come into my classroom. And, you know, as you mentioned, once you start to get some of these strategies, you start to experiment with them, then you build that confidence and you become a far better teacher, and you'll get through your content. And, you know, that's the great thing.
Absolutely. But consistency as well, you know, and obviously you are trying new things, but try something for a little while, because, you know, every day, excuse me, is different. But if you have that consistency, then the students know kind of what to expect as well. And that creates an element of safety in the room. Like, okay, I know if I do X, Y, Z, my likely consequence will be, X, Y, Z. And something that I always stress at the start of the year with my students that I feel starts us off like on a really good term is I always say to them, you are teenagers, you are learning. You're learning not just in this classroom, but who you are and how you interact and how you behave. You will make mistakes. Mistakes are normal. Mistakes are part of life. But we want to make sure that when we make a mistake, we acknowledge it and then we try and learn from it, and that, establishing for them it's not about, getting A's in everything. It's about, are you trying? And if you are trying and it's not working, I'm here to help you. And that I think goes a long way when the students realize, oh, okay, like if I'm struggling, you will realize and you will come and try and support me. And that I think really starts to establish a nice like bond within the room as well. But yeah, I think as well, okay, so, we talked a lot about behavior management there. And again, like you said, our suggestions, things that we see that have worked for us and things that we encourage of new teachers that have come and worked alongside us too. In terms of some practical suggestions for, given that it is sink and swim year, something that I think is really, we don't want to like burn out in that first year. And look, it's not hard to do, right? You're balancing all these students, a classroom, you're balancing your professional learning, your interactions, you're balancing your work ethic and your resources and everything. And it's really easy to get bogged down in just working nonstop, right? It's so easy. But if I can share something that I remember being told by my acting head teacher in that first school, she was really great. And she was like to me, like, Belinda, it's okay if the sheet is not pretty. It's okay if it's not the most, super well thought out. Like, there are lessons where your activities will be like that. But it's okay if you go back to basics. And to be quite frank, a lot of my students in those classes needed basics. And it was nice to be told from, a veteran, like, quality learning can take place in a variety of forms. And it's just something I think at that time I needed to hear,
Yeah, no, exactly right. And it's definitely something I know, like we go back to that idea of the principle of, consistency, setting those routines, setting those standards, and it's, that realistic sort of goal setting. So sometimes you'll get a class that, it's a bit too hard to maybe do that super duper crazy good activity that you've spent 15 days planning. I'm exaggerating a bit here. The
Are you though?
For our
Are
English
you
teachers
though?
here. Also, I mean, some teachers are like that, but in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, sometimes students like working. You might do something like a chalk and talk sort of activity.
Yes.
It's just nice and
Yes.
simple, just so they get a
Yes.
sense of achievement. They know, and then once they start to build that sort of capability and have that sense of achievement, then you can start to implement, these new creative things in the classroom. And I think that's definitely something that you have to consider. Don't come in and just overraw them with all of these great ideas. Just start simple, look what works, get to know your students, and then build off of that. I think that's so significant, and that sort of allowed us to work towards a little bit of success there. The other thing I will say is this: when you're looking at your classroom environment, it's a lot of the times in a teaching space, we can sometimes fall into that trap where we're looking at competing against our fellow teachers. Oh, look at the results that I've got here, or I. And I just need to challenge or address that right now. You're a faculty for a reason, and it's not your kids versus the kids of another teacher's class. Really, you're there as a teacher, an educator, to help all kids. And this is where we talk about sharing your resources, asking people to come in collaboratively. Look, you've got like an exemplar text which one of your students have developed. Share it with, I'm not saying assessments, I'll just make that clear, and all that sort of stuff, but talk with your fellow teachers. Hey, cool, like this is what it is. I know for seniors classes, when I know that I am not probably, I didn't have the greatest expertise when it came to creative writing in my first few years, I would often
No,
ask my
me
head
too.
teacher, okay, can you have a look at
Mhm,
these drafts for my
mhm.
students that are working with this and offer some suggestions? Also, you're getting valuable PD in that sense, because not only do you see what your experienced teachers are looking for, but you are now helping the student holistically as a faculty, as opposed to having that mindset where it's my student,
Yeah,
I'm going to get them to a band 5 or a 6.
yeah,
I think that's where we can fall into a trap as a young teacher and older teacher as well at times. Remember, you're all
mhm,
in it
mhm.
collaboratively. You're all in it for all of your students in that cohort. So
Yeah,
every
it's true.
result is a reflection of your faculty. It's not a reflection of you particularly as an individual, as much as we'd like it to
Yeah,
be. I think when
mhm.
you break that sort of belief there, you'll find a lot more success overall in your English faculty.
Absolutely, and working together. And you're right, because we very rarely have the exact same English class from year
Mm,
7 up until the
mm,
HSC year. Like, it's virtually non-existent, the nature of
mm,
it. But you're right. And I would even, sometimes I would create a resource, and then I would say to my head teacher, or it wasn't just my head teacher. I had a lot of other teachers had a bit more
mm,
experience than me that were happy, and I would just say, like, this is my goal. This is what I wanted to achieve. Do you
mm.
think it's going to help do that? Can I get that? And I think the most important thing that you said was support and helping our students looks many different ways. It's not
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not the be all end all of what's that end result. Yeah.
yeah.
So what a student gets out of you can be a multitude of things. And I think
That's
it's
right.
really important. Remembering that, I think, helps keep you away from that, I'm in competition, and because that has not very nice consequences either.
No, no, exactly
Yeah.
right. I know this in particular with one of our teachers when we're doing the standard course. I mean, I used to always go to my mentor, okay, I'm teaching this like this, and I've seen you do this in your classroom. How would I do this for myself? I remember for the first year that this teacher had started off with the standard course, literally every single lesson, like we'd have a recess or a lunch or a break after every period at the school that we're in. But the teacher would come in and sit with me for like 15 to 20 minutes and just go through what they've gone through in that lesson. And,
Mhm.
sometimes I'd just be like, that's fantastic. Keep doing what you're
Yeah.
doing. Other times you can offer like some suggestions here or there. And it was just like that collaborative learning has now then
Yes.
inspired that teacher to go on and, become a HSC marker in that sort of space there as well. So, and achieve great things in that space. And this is what I'm talking about, collaborative learning.
Mm.
It's so significant, it's important, and don't be afraid to ask, because people will be willing to ask. Like I said, 15 to 20
Absolutely.
minutes in a day is a big thing, but when you see that it's going towards contributing to helping your students holistically, people will
Mhm.
take the time to help you out in that space, and that's great for your well-being as well. I will say this, like we often don't think enough about self-care. I know in my
Yes.
first 2 3 years, I like, this is not even a joke, no word of a lie, but every day I'd come home, and I used to drive an hour or so to and from work, but you get home and you'd have a nap, and your nap, instead of being a 10-minute power nap, becomes a 2-hour proper sleep.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep. Yep.
it's normal, because your brains are wired and to
Yeah.
the T, like right on edge for the whole day, depending
Yeah.
on
It's draining.
how many people you have in your class. So it's normal. It's okay to have that. That just means, don't make sure you're not spending time where you're working till 1 2 in the morning trying to develop your resources and plan your lessons, because you come to class a little bit tired the next day. This is where it's
Yeah.
okay to, right, make sure you take care of yourself. Go to the gym, go for a walk after work, make sure you're eating healthy food and getting your 6 to 7, maybe 8 hours of
Yeah.
sleep, because these are the things that will help you be the most effective teacher in the classroom, and make use of your
Absolutely.
time in school. That's probably my big thing. I find sometimes as young teachers we can be overawed by the situation, and we might want to jump onto our mobile phones and look what's happening in the outside world, or what's going on, on social media or whatever it might be. But honestly, when you're at work, spend your time working, and that gives you that time and space then when it comes to your evenings and even your mornings. I know, like, I set
Yeah.
my mornings off now where I go to the gym. That's my space where I might listen to a great podcast. Sometimes it might be about teaching, or a subject that we might be doing. But you have to make sure you take care of your health. And then in saying that, also, you have your mentors who you can be vulnerable with, you can share your things with, because they won't judge you. You know, we've all been there. We've all been through some of the experiences you've been through. You know, and it's not about judgment. It's not about, you know, saying, well, you shouldn't be like that as a teacher. No, people will offer or support and lead you and guide you to that path of success, which is so, so important. That self-care and that work-life balance is essential, or else you get burnt out, and, you know, it's not good for anyone, really.
No, you're so right. And it's so normal, like as a, you know, like as a new teacher, you know, we're all human, and sometimes it's not even the specific thing that a student says or does. It's a multitude of things you crack, right? Like I can't tell you the amount of times like I felt overwhelmed, or I had seen someone else feel overwhelmed, and because you all can understand that, and your colleagues will rally around you. You know, they will help you. They'll help you vent. They'll help you get out of your system. And it's good to form those relationships so you can all lean on each other when you have a moment like that, where you need another person to be there to support you, you know. And it's so true. Self-care is number one. You need to try and establish some boundaries, you know. After this, like you said, or even, okay, I'm going to stay at school until this time, and then it's time for me to clock off and go home. You know, I'm going to go home, and in this time frame is dinner and maybe something for distraction. And I know it's easier said than done, especially in those early years, but you do get into a rhythm where you are able to do more at school and get more things out of the way and get on your feet. And then I realized, you know, it was really liberating when you get to that second year where you're like, oh, I've actually taught majority of this. Obviously, I'm differentiating for a new class, but there's almost that sense of relief in like, oh, I get to now actually refine my approaches.
Yeah. And
So
I will say this.
the work changes. Hey,
Yeah. I'll say this. One of the biggest mistakes that you can make is connecting your work emails to your personal mobile phone.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
I agree. I don't have that either.
Don't do that. Have your work-life balance. Sorry for head teachers and bosses that might be listening to us, but honestly, we need space. You need that space. And like I said, if you work hard during the school day and you don't get through everything, you know, that's okay. There's another day where you can achieve these things. And, you know, you just prioritize what's the important things. Ask your head teacher, well, what are the things that need to be done? And then prioritize in that sort of way, because I understand, like, we're still in the classroom. I understand it's busy. There are some days still 10 years on that I just think, what am I doing? But you just tick off the main things, and slowly things happen, and you'll have some sort of relief rather than crumbling under the pressure.
Yeah. If you don't ask for help, no one will know to help you. And I'm certainly guilty of that. But that's really the thing, you know, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength that you can say, you know what, this is all a bit too much, and I need to now, go and get my support, talk to my mentor, talk to another teacher that's, you know, teaching what I'm teaching. And, you know, we are very, very kind as teachers, as a people. We like to share a lot. And a lot of teachers are willing to go, don't spend time doing that. I have a resource that you can just amend, and I'm happy to share. And, you know, if somebody shares something with you, you know, share something back, you know, and we kind of are in it together in that way. And you're doing half the work, you know. So I think that's a good little tip too, is be kind to each other and help each other and share what you can and work together as a faculty.
Exactly.
All right. Well, look, I think we have covered a lot of main ideas in terms of, you know, new scheme teacher, how we set up our classrooms, our routines, what we experienced, what we suggest. I think the big takeaway is to remember that you are part of for me, I think I'm part of a faculty, which means that I can be relied upon to help, and I can rely on them to help me. And I understand completely that, you know, different schools might have different dynamics, but there is always, I'm sure, somebody that can be your, you know, support person. And don't be afraid to reach out, because you can't get help if nobody knows you need it, you know?
Yeah, no, exactly right. And look, even like if you're listening to us and you're feeling some of the things and you feel like oh, cool, I connect or resonate with some of these ideas, reach out to us through email or the socials or whatever it might be, and we might be able to offer now our 2 cents worth of advice again, and help to nurture you along. But as Belle just mentioned, you will 100% of the time you will find someone in the school that will act as your mentor, act as your friend, act as your support. So you're not in it alone, as much as sometimes it can feel like it, and we can internalize a lot of our disappointments of the day at times. Some people are the opposite, where we might just tell everything to everyone. That in its case in itself is a different sort of case, but we won't go into that right now. But look, just remember, you're doing a fantastic job as a new teacher. You have such a privilege to be in that classroom in order to shape that next generation. You need to understand your why. It's probably something that universities do say and talk about, and I would have sat there and rolled my eyes about this idea of why, and I understand it now. Why are you teaching? What is the reason for you selecting or going down this route? And most of us, it's because we want to help mold and develop and refine that next generation. And I always go with that little anecdote there that metaphor that one of my mentors gave me. I remember I was ready to quit, probably 6 months in. And he said, he literally sat there, listened to me for like an hour. He was a head teacher and of a different faculty, actually. And he sort of just sat there for an hour, didn't say anything. And at the end of it, he said, "You good?" I said, "Yeah, I'm feeling all right." And he's like, "Well, tomorrow I want you to access that well of enthusiasm that every teacher needs to access before they come in. And just remember why you do this. And, feel free to hop in whenever you want." And I stayed there for like 10 years. So it worked.
Love that. Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah, we are professionals. Have confidence in that, and like you said, have confidence in the fact that you know what you need to do. Sometimes we're learning the extra things, but ultimately, if you go in with that good heart and that good mind ready to mold, things will work out. They will.
Yeah. It'll definitely be a good thing. But it's great. It's great talking about these things, and there's so much more we can share, but I guess this is some of the main things that
I think
we
so.
can bestow upon you as our listeners.
And think too, like in a few years, 5 years, 10 years, you're going to get to the point where you're wonderfully reminiscing about all the people who helped you and all the amazing things you learn, and like just the beautiful like friendships that you are going to make with, people every day that are doing what you're doing as well, and that's like a lovely thing, a really lovely thing, like us.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And still going strong.
That's it. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for another episode. Have a look at our show notes for all the links and channels where you can find us and our resources. And we'd love to hear from you soon.
Yeah, awesome. See you guys.